Welcome to Whole Team Eats Podcast, a 24/8 media production. Ever wonder who trains your favorite athlete? Join Tim Miller as he takes a look at the behind-the-scenes training of professional and collegiate athletes. Tim connects with trainers, athletes, and others in the sports community to share their stories. This podcast is dedicated to highlighting the work of athletes and trainers to inspire action and build community.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to an all-new episode of Whole Team Eats Podcast presented by our friends at InertiaWave. This is episode 7, season 1. I'm your host, Tim Miller, and on the show, I sit down with Darelle Noel. Darelle grew up in Houston, where his dad was a pastor who taught the importance of structure and discipline to him and his siblings. This structure was crucial in growing up in the inner city of Houston, and after a career in culinary arts didn't come to fruition, he then found his passion for training. On the show, we discussed Darelle's background growing up playing sports and how his parents' health risks played a role in the start of his training career. After learning the industry and building up his reputation in his community, Darelle bet on himself and moved around the country to train some of the best athletes in a variety of sports. We go in depth on what it's like to motivate and work with several top athletes, including Trae Young of the Atlanta Hawks and Kayvon Thibodeaux of the New York Giants. This show is made possible by our presenting sponsor, InertiaWave, a new fitness product used by top fitness professionals and coaches worldwide. It's called InertiaWave, a superior alternative to battle ropes, a lightweight, formidable, portable, affordable metabolic conditioning device weighing only 3 pounds and 9.5 feet long. With over 50 ways to anchor, the InertiaWave integrated technology engages your core and supercharges your cardiovascular system in 60 seconds or less. That's right, the world record is 60 seconds, all out. Used in sports academies, military, UFC, personal trainers, home fitness, and garage gyms. And within the last 4 years, over 80,000 sold worldwide. Check out this top conditioning device, InertiaWave, at InertiaWave.com. That's InertiaWave.com. Thanks for coming on the show, Darelle. Really excited to have you on and hear your story. If you could, I think a good place to get started would be just to tell our listeners how things have been to start the year for your training.
Hey Tim, how are you? Appreciate you having me. The beginning of the year is always the busiest time of the year. Like the first 3 to 4 months, we're in the midst of NFL pre-draft training. So starting January 1st of every year, we go right into training. And this year was a really, really successful year for myself as well as the athletes that I was able to work with. Starting with Kayvon Thibodeaux. He went number 5 in the NFL draft, so it was a pretty busy, eventful year, and it's been a great year so far.
Good. I know just from watching your social media and connecting with you earlier in this year that you were really busy from a combine standpoint, and I hope to touch on that and what it was like to train some of the players you did, like you just mentioned, Kayvon Thibodeaux, later in the show here. But really where I want to start here today is to give our listeners an understanding of, one, who you are, and then, what kind of led you into training. But why don't we just start with your background, where you grew up, did you play any sports, and what eventually led you into training?
Oh, great question. I grew up in Houston, Texas. I come from a 2-parent household. My father was a pastor, so he had his own church. And my mother was a school teacher. So growing up in inner city Houston, I had both of my parents, but I also was raised in, an inner city neighborhood. So I was able to get kind of both sides of the train track. So I was able to see things that I wasn't supposed to do, but having both parents in the household and also my dad being, a pastor, I was able to have structure, learn values, and understand how to do things the right way. So seeing both sides allowed me to focus on the good and see the bad, but also make my own choices in deciding what I wanted to accomplish and be and um, figure out what I wanted to invest into myself. Um, I grew up playing football, basketball. I also ran track. Once I got to ninth grade of high school, I realized I wasn't tall enough to play basketball. So I just stuck with football. And I ran track, and everyone said that I was fast, but I just didn't like running like that. So I just played football. In my last year in high school, um, I ran track. Just as something to um, finish school and get my credits. So that's that, that's how I was as a kid. But growing up, I played all sports. I was an athlete. That's what we did. We didn't have a lot to do inside the house, so most of the time we spent outside the house playing games and different sports with friends and kids in the neighborhood.
I think that sounds like a lot of us, where we come to this point when we reach middle school, high school, and we realize trying to figure out what sports you're going to play. You sound like a lot of us, where we realize we're not tall enough to play basketball. You're not alone. Everybody tends to play a lot of sports when they're younger, and then kind of fall in love with one or two sports as they get a little bit older. So you, real quick, before we get into the track and what led you into speed training and all those things, your dad's a pastor at a church. Would you say that he was kind of like a guide for you living in the inner city to kind of push you in the right direction? And I know it can be difficult growing up in an inner city of any city, but in Houston, was he somewhat of a guide for you growing up and to push you in the right direction with that discipline that you mentioned?
Oh, absolutely, most definitely. He was a guide in many capacities. Even though he was a pastor, he wasn't an overbearing pastor, which means he never forced us to dwell into the Bible or into church and things like that. Of course, we knew we had to, but he didn't push that envelope to the point where we would resist it. But most of the lessons that I learned from him was valuing hard work, remembering your name and who you are and where you come from, and just continue to strive and work for what you wanted to accomplish. And that's some of the biggest lessons that I learned from my father. In the summer we would get up at 5, 6 in the morning to clean up the house, work in the yard, mow the yard, clean out the garage, whatever the case may be. It was something. It was something dealing with working in, I wouldn't call it labor. It's just taking care of what's yours, And from learning to take care of what's yours, there's um, a much more of appreciation for what you accomplish.
And do you have brothers and sisters?
Yes, I have one brother and two sisters, and
Okay.
and
And
I'm the
where do you
youngest.
fall? Are you older or younger?
I'm the youngest
Okay.
of four.
Youngest of four. I was going to ask if maybe you were put in the lead role at some points when your dad was busy doing what he's doing, but it seems like it was the other way around for you. Maybe your brothers and sisters were kind of looking out for you and kind of setting by an example for you of
Yeah,
how to
yeah. I was
deal with things in the inner city.
I was never the leader. I was always the I would say rebel, the guy that veered off and did his own. But my older siblings would always get in trouble because I would either veer off and do my own thing. And when you're growing up with other siblings, all the siblings would have to come home together, right? And I would always run off, or they would have to wait for me, which means that we were late getting home, or we would get in trouble, or whatever the case may be. But they all got in trouble from me quite often, and I think as I've gotten older, still is like that, because I'm that one kid that always navigates on his own and just focuses on doing his own thing.
I think that might give you some understanding of when that happens with your own kids, right? You're a
Hmm.
father of four, is that correct?
So,
So I think you'll have some compassion when your kids are late or they get into trouble. You might be a
absolutely.
little bit more understanding.
I mean, I understand it, but it's definitely some of the biggest challenges with having children of your own is dealing with that and understanding and developing that patience for that. It's pretty tough.
Absolutely. I think I wanted to go back into, so you run track in high school. What led you? Is that what kind of led you into training initially to kind of fall in love with training, or was it something else?
No, when I went to college from high school, um, I initially wanted to go to cooking school. So I wanted to go to cooking school. I wanted to be a chef. Even growing up with my father, we used to barbecue and cater and do things like that quite often. So I fell in love with cooking and doing things like that. So I wanted to pursue that. So that's initially what I wanted to do out of high school. My father wanted me to go to college. So I went to college, walked on at Midwestern State University in Wichita Falls, Texas. Um, I did that for 2 years. I really wasn't interested because I really, really wanted to go to cooking school. From that point, I didn't take care of the things that I needed to take care in the classroom. At that time, it was around 2006. Um, so I came home for a couple of semesters, didn't go to school, just went through a path of figuring out what I wanted to do. Of course, being a kid, um, didn't know. So I continued to pursue football. That never worked out. And I ended up getting a job at an elementary school as a teacher's assistant. So I did that for 3 years and pretty much just worked, not pursuing my passion or not really didn't know. I was just living for from that standpoint. Um, for about 3 or 4 years, I was in that space of just doing absolutely nothing. And then one day, when me and my buddy, his name is Devon, was like, I started a workout group at the park. We used to work out at this park in Houston called Herman Park, right by the zoo that was not too far from my house. So we began a workout group, and the focus of that group was to share the knowledge and the awareness for people in our neighborhood for the benefits of to develop and teach them the benefits of eating better, working out, and how it can be instrumental to um, the quality of life that you could live from um, staying away from medicines, being healthy, things of that nature. Growing up in Houston, Texas, in the southern part of the country, we didn't grow up eating pretty healthy. Now I'm in California eating avocado toast on a regular, but we didn't grow up eating things like that. So that was something that got us into the training space. And once I had that conversation with him, it was perfect because both of my parents had health risk factors, and that was something that hit home to me, and that's what really sparked my initial urge to become a um, just a trainer.
That's great to hear. So both of your parents have health issues. Eating healthy is something that you can implement just to help mitigate that risk
Mhm.
initially. So is this the point in the story where you start to kind of find your love for training, and you go into it for a lot of different reasons? Obviously, your parents being one of them, you having a background in sports growing up. But is this the point where you make a transition from Houston to Los Angeles? Is that correct?
No, that's a little bit down the line. So that transition started 2011. So we did the workout group for um, about 8 to 12 months. So we did it for quite a while, and we had a pretty good turnout, and it was a free camp. So um, at the end of 2011, um, something was telling me to go back to school. So I enrolled back in school in 2012, right? So the the spring semester of 2012, I enrolled back in school, and I was applying for internships, you know, for that spring semester or the fall semester. And then as soon as I enrolled, maybe a week or two later, I applied for an internship to the Exos facilities. They have 5 or 6 facilities across the United States, and I got an email back saying that, hey, you've been chosen for a Skype interview for Exos. Right, so that happened, and I chose the internship. And from there, I never looked back because again, I had one child at the time, and I needed to figure out how to make those things work.
So you choose the internship, you leave school once again, right, to choose this internship with Exos, and now you are transitioning out to LA where you are interning at Exos, correct?
My internship was in Frisco, Texas. So
Frisco Tech.
I moved to Los Angeles in 2006. Um, at the time of my internship, it was 2012. So I interned in Texas, in Frisco, Texas. Um, and when I talked to his name was Eric Danningberg. He said they have an opportunity for you, but it would be in the Frisco location. So the Frisco location was a newer facility, so they didn't have housing. I had to find my own housing, my own transportation. I basically had to um, make my own means of, you know, accommodating myself, which I didn't have a problem with because this is what something that I embedded in my head that I wanted. From May 2015 all the way to August 2015, I stayed with some relatives in Mesquite, Texas, which was about a 50-minute drive to the Exos in Frisco, Texas, every single day. Um, and it's only two ways to get there. So one way was to take a toll road every single day. So I compiled up maybe $3,000 worth of toll fees. But at the end of the day, this was something that I wanted. Like I'm the type of person that is just if I want something, I'm gonna pursue it and focus wholeheartedly on it. Uh, Mitigate distractions. And once I got the internship and I finished it, I just wanted to be the freaking best at it, and that was my mindset uh, doing the internship, and then even after it. Once I finished the internship and went back to Houston, I just began reaching out to people to train. My first maybe 2 summers, I was training guys for free just to one mold my craft, but also to um, get people to understand that this is what I really do. This is what I developed, and I continue to develop my training um, just from dealing with athletes. Like I work with a lot of high school athletes going into college. So I've learned things that I learned. I applied things that I learned in my internship, but also learned how to um, apply those things differently to different people. So that's really what helped mold my training skill set. I'm working with a lot of different kids and understanding how to train everyone differently and how to communicate with everyone differently. Um, and I got my first professional athlete in 2014 at the time. His name was Donnie Avery. He was playing for the Kansas City Chiefs. A guy that I played in high school didn't really like, but he reached out to me and was like, how much you charge? I said, I charge $25. And I was like, you know what? I'll charge you that. Plus, I'll give you an extra $50 because you have to travel to me. Um, so that was $75 every time every workout, and we worked out 5 times a week. So that was my first professional athlete. Um, and from there, I was like, oh, I think I'm good enough, right? So one thing led to another, and um, I got an opportunity to intern with Athletic Games, Bell Games out in Las Vegas, Nevada. Um, and then that's what led me to Los Angeles.
That's great to hear. So you get this. You start out with high school kids training for free for almost 2 years to kind of mold your craft, build your reputation, and really get the word out there that this is what you're doing on a daily basis. Like this is what you're passionate about. And in 2014, you get your first professional athlete from the Kansas City Chiefs, who is now paying you. And I have to guess that that's a huge vote of confidence for you to say, if I'm good enough to gain the trust of a professional athlete, I'm good enough to scale this to do multiple professional athletes or collegiate athletes. And that's the point where you move to, Athletic Gains, and you start working under Trae Gains. And, obviously he's got a bunch of high-profile athletes that he has dealt with over the years, and I'm sure that's kind of the point in this story where you start to work under him and learn from him, but also meet a lot of different connections within the training world, a lot of them being collegiate and professional athletes. So what was it like to go from your first athlete to now fast forward working with Trae Gaines and working with some of the athletes that he deals with?
For me, it wasn't much different. It was just navigating a different space, meaning not a different culture, being in Houston and Las Vegas and LA, totally different. From spending all of that time learning the training of it, I had to learn a different approach, meaning body language, be present physically, the way you look, the way you speak, your body language, things like that. So the next phase of all of that was uh, learning how to communicate, how to talk to people, how to um, um, how do I want to say it? How to your demeanor, like everything you do, people see, people look at, and people can take a certain way. Not knowing these things consciously was one of my biggest things. So I would make certain body language. If I didn't like something, I would show it physically. So from 2015, 16 to like now, those are the bigger focuses for me. Learning how to communicate to people, but also show interest, how to communicate to 12 different people at the same time without having a poker face or whatever. But it was a learning curve for me because it was, again, like I said before, I like to do things my own way, and you know I only knew what I knew. Totally different, um, totally different way of doing things from in Vegas and Los Angeles opposed to Houston. Um, but when I interned with Travell in 2015, every day he would say something about what I was doing, and I didn't realize it until um, he continued to say it every day. Fix your shoulders. You can't wear that hat. You can't wear your hat backwards. Right? So it's little things that I didn't notice because they were subconsciously in the things that I did. You know, and when I was working in Houston, no one was looking at me. I wasn't in a big facility. Um, every day I didn't have been around different, um, different athletes like that. Um, and that really helped me understand that the way I approach things, the way I walk, the way I talk, everything is, it's on a microscope. The first year when I was interning in, we had Ronnie Stanley, who became the number 6 overall pick in that year's draft. Right, so I came in, I interned for a few weeks, um, and again, I felt confident in my training. So when the guys saw me coach, even though I was like kind of shadowing and things like that, it's like, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. So began to coach the speed and the movement from that point, and from that point, I was the guy that was um, kind of overseeing the speed and movement department. So for me, to answer your question, it didn't feel much different. The biggest, from a coaching standpoint, the biggest difference was just controlling the things that I can control from a personal appearance standpoint, like a confidence, being confident. When you're not confident, it pretty much shows in the way you move and talk and your body language and things like that. I had to adapt in that aspect.
And I'm sure it takes time to adapt, and just even if you hear it day after day from somebody like Trae, right? It's not going to happen overnight. It's something that are habits or something that you really weren't aware of initially, and you didn't have to necessarily be aware of those things when you're training on your own. So you go from training on your own to training in a bigger facility, and you're right, everything is under the microscope, how you're evaluated, what attracts that high-profile athlete into that gym. Everything has to be kind of in order from not only a training standpoint, from a personality standpoint, from an energy standpoint, and everything, every detail, down to how your shoulders are, and how you're communicating with some of these athletes is extremely important. So now let's fast forward, and something I want to touch on. You had a couple both very rewarding years and difficult years. I think it was 2017 and 2018. Why don't you tell us what it was like during those years? I know you had a lot of different, high-profile NBA players selected in the first round. I believe it was in 2018. But even before that, the year prior, you had some stuff happened with your family, and I know that was difficult for you, as we were discussing, prior to the show. Why don't you go into that and kind of tell our listeners what it was like to go from the lows of 2017 into the bounce back and the highs of 2018?
Okay, so let me take the step prior to that. Like when I began working with athletic games in Travail, it started at a high note, right? Again, Rodney Stanley, number 6 overall pick. Um, and then shortly after that, we went right into um, well, a couple things happened. So after that, I got a offer to um, to go to Stamford, Connecticut, and open a facility, right? To kind of be the guys who teach teach the guys to teach the guys the ropes of training, right? So we went from Vegas to Connecticut, and then ended up in Pasadena. And meanwhile, throughout that time, we were training different athletes. Antonio Brown came to the facility, um, boxers, you name it. Like we were training a lot of high profile athletes. Again, just assisting and kind of just being in that space. When guys needed to do speed and movement, then I was the guy. Um, 2015, 2016, again, 2016, 2017, I would say was one of our biggest years. We had um, a ton of professional basketball athletes, a ton of professional football athletes, um, and also quite a few MLB athletes as well. So in 2017, I thought we were having like an amazing year, right? Again, the year goes from NFL Combine to NBA Combine, NBA Draft Prep, and then the summer. Had an amazing summer. Once all the guys left, the last guy to leave was Taj Gibson, who was playing for the Chicago Bulls at the time, right? So we had maybe a week or two to just kind of decompress. Um, and then my dad ended up passing away in September 2017. Right. So coming from a big year, thinking that we had a really, really, really amazing year, to that was really, really um, tough. And around September through January is when the training seasons pretty much slow down for athletes. So I had a lot of time to digest that. And from my standpoint, I never really got to digest it. So I was in a pretty dark space of communication and work and things like that. And I just didn't know how I would get out of it. So for me, I was waiting to get back to work January. That way I didn't have to think about it so
Do you think that was almost more difficult to deal with, the fact that it happened right in kind of your training off season, when the NFL and MLB is still going on, and then the NBA is starting in October? So it's like you're kind of not like a dead period, but it slows down significantly in your training world. And was that more difficult to have? That slowdown in training, as you just mentioned, because I'm sure if you're still working, obviously you would take time off when your dad passed away, but at least your daily focus wouldn't be just thinking about kind of how it impacts everything, and having some downtime.
I really don't know. As we talked about before, I just like to work, right? So it maybe it happened at a great time. I mean, I kind of wish it never did happen. Uh, but I really can't say if it happened at a good time or not. But I just kind of had to figure out a way to get back to work and cope with it again. It wasn't just myself; it was you know my entire family that had to deal with it. So I had to figure out a way to kind of still be that pillar in the rock that they looked at without um, every day walking around in these moods and these a stressful environment, and it took a very long time to get out of. Um, and you know, again, once the year started, I got back to work. But again, every moment that I had that I wasn't working, it was pretty depressing and stressful, and just emotionally. I'm not really an emotional person, but that took a big toll on me. I had no one to talk to. I felt like I had no one to talk to, no one to communicate with. My brother came down here maybe a month ago, and that was one of the first times I actually talked about how I felt about that entire process. And this is now 5 years later, right? Um, in 2018, we were working with a few basketball guys for the NFL draft process alongside Travell. Um, and that year we had three first round draft picks. And once that happened, I think that was like one of the greatest. I felt like that was one of the greatest accomplishments in my career because that was a weight lifted off my shoulder, and I kind of saluted that to my father.
And who were the three NBA athletes that went in the first round?
Trae Young went number 6 overall. That was traded for the number 3 pick for Luka Doncic. Um, Zaire Smith and Moritz Wagner. He was the 3 first round draft picks.
So you have Trae Young, obviously, in the top 10 in the draft. And then Zaire Smith gets traded to the 76ers. And then you have Mo Wagner. I believe he went to the Orlando Magic. Is that correct?
He was, no, I think he went to the Lakers.
Oh, yeah. That might be his younger brother who went to the Magic.
Well, they both play for the Magic now, but Mo went to the Lakers, then the Washington Wizards, now the Magic. So I just talked to him.
Gotcha.
I just talked to him a couple of days ago. He's on that new Hustle movie, and I sent him a message. I was like, "Oh, you're an actor now." Yeah, it was.
That must be interesting to see some of the guys that you've spent a lot of time with now, in a movie. And I don't know if I guess you've got the chance to see it. It just, I think, released last Wednesday or Thursday. The movie about Adam Sandler being a scout and assistant coach for the Philadelphia 76ers. And I think Mo Wagner was one of the selected players for the 76ers. So it was interesting to see him in that role. Obviously, a big change from the time that you spent with him, which was training, not on a movie set. So you go from the lows of 2017 to the bounce back. You have an amazing year. It's a huge accomplishment and step forward for you in your training progression. Then for a couple of years, you went to Sports Academy, which was also called at one point Mamba Sports Academy, which is Kobe Bryant's gym, or a gym that he had partial ownership of at one point. What was it like to transition to Sports Academy, and how was your time there?
My time there was great. So it was an opportunity to be a part of a team and a system that really devoted on focusing on the athlete, right? So every time my ties to Sports Academy was doing NFL pre-draft training, and I was the multi-directional coach. So when we have NFL combine training, they had a speed department and they had a strength department. I was a part of the speed department, and my focus was teaching the pro agility shuffle and the L drill. So it was great. It allowed me to learn how to work in a team environment, and not be the guy or the focus or a big part of the solution. Like when me and Travell and our team worked closely together, it was me communicating directly to him and vice versa, and then we would go, kill the program, and then when I started working with NFL pre-draft with Sports Academy. Had a big boardroom of maybe 10 or 12 people that we had to communicate with. My first year was Les Spellman, speed director. I did the multi-directional speed. And then we also had 3 or 4 strength coaches, the physical therapy department there, the biomechanic tech was there, the owner. So we were in the big boardroom communicating on our programs and different aspects of that. So it was again different than what I was used to, but I also learned to adapt, how to be a team player. Also, especially what we talked about earlier, being in a room like that, how to not show that when you disagree with things. So all of those things was a great step for me in the right direction. But um, I continue to learn how to put myself in those type of situations, in those type of rooms, and position myself at the table, right? Because I felt like I belonged in those type of tables, in those type of rooms, at those type of tables. But I had to kind of continue to prove myself.
Yeah. So it's not even prove yourself, but it's also kind of prove to yourself that
Yeah,
you belong in these
absolutely.
situations.
Yeah,
Which I know that it takes a while for people in any industry, whether it's training or some folks who are studying to become a doctor or working in finance, kind of proving to yourself that you're ready to take that next jump. And you obviously are dealing with some bigger names like Travell Gaines and Les Spellman, and you're dealing with high profile athletes of the NFL, the NBA, as you mentioned, just had 3 first-round picks in 2018, and then the MLB as well. So it's interesting to kind of hear your progression through training. And so you spend a few years with Mamba Sports Academy. I have to ask, did Kobe Bryant ever come around, or was it just he had ownership in the gym?
no, it's crazy. That year, he was in the gym quite often because we had 22 draft prospects that year. So again, that year we had a tremendous first round. Um, I believe our guys' numbers were off the charts. We did a great job. The entire team did a great job. Um, so Kobe Bryant was there quite often, and also he came and spoke to the guys, quite often. So we would see his face. It's crazy. We were talking about him. I was talking to him maybe 2 or 3 days ago, and he has this big presence about him. Like soon as you see him, it's like he's glowing, right? So I would see him quite often.
That's interesting. So I know obviously it's still impacting a lot of folks today. His tragic passing in what was it, 2020.
Hmm.
Something that I know we talked about on our first call when I mentioned that, or you had mentioned to me that you dealt with Mama Sports Academy, and I kind of told you about the background of 24/8 and how we came to be. Our name actually derives from a tribute to Kobe Bryant. So a little bit of background on 24/8 for those who don't know this is, myself and my co-founder Pete LaJoy, we both went to school in Philadelphia. We went to LaSalle University, where ironically enough, Kobe's dad, Joe Bryant, or I think they nicknamed him Jelly Bean or Bean Bryant.
Hmm.
He played at LaSalle and then went on to play in the pros. So we thought, okay, what can we, to create our name, something wanted to pay tribute to not only Kobe Bryant, because he does have those ties with his family to LaSalle, where we went to school, but also to the city of Philadelphia, where we're starting this idea of trying to promote behind-the-scenes training of professional athletes, collegiate athletes, and really trying to build the brands of trainers. And at that time, we start to think about different names to pay tribute. Not only is 24/8, a play on the consistent work that has to be done around the clock, and nobody better than to, choose Kobe Bryant to kind of show that craft or dedication to his craft. But it's also a tribute to both of his numbers that he wore during his playing career. So both 24 and 8 were, I think, if I saw a stat where he has, I think it's 3 rings in one number, 2 in the other, but his stats are almost identical in both numbers. So not only is it a tribute to both of the numbers that he wore, but I don't think that there's anybody, and you can try to dispute this if you want, if there's anybody who epitomizes dedication to their craft and behind-the-scenes trainer quite like Kobe Bryant did. He was one of a kind. He has a lasting impact on a lot of folks, not only just in the training industry, but in all walks of life. He was a very, very iconic figure. Also, our logo, where our logo stems from, we have, if you've ever seen our logo, we've got 24 dots representing Kobe's number 24, and then we have 2 dots colored teal for his daughter Gianna, who also tragically passed away in that crash. So she wore number 2 in her basketball games. So we thought it was a tribute to both not only Kobe Bryant, the city of Philadelphia, where we went to school, but also his daughter Gianna. So that's kind of the background of 24/8 and how our name derived. You obviously got the opportunity to meet him, and he spent some time giving speeches to some of the athletes or kids that you dealt with a lot. So why don't we transition now? So you transition from Mama Sports Academy, or now it's called Sports Academy, back to Athletic Gains, and you're training this year for the NFL Combine. Can you tell us what it's like to train for the NFL Combine and some of the big names that I know you mentioned earlier in the show? Kayvon Thibodeaux, he was I believe if I'm correct, he was the number 5 pick out of Oregon to the New York Giants. What is it like to spend time with an athlete like that, and then watch him get picked so high in the draft?
Yeah, NFL Combine is always great. Again, in the past, I've worked with Sports Academy, but this particular year, I had the opportunity to work with Kayvon Thibodeaux, because we had a past, we had a history. Like when I worked with Trae Games, Athletic Games, and Kayvon was in high school. Um, we used to work with him and train him his last 3 years in high school. So this was a great opportunity to work with someone that we had history with. If you don't know much about the NFL pre-draft process, it's a lot about continuity, right? Guys you trust and being around guys that know you. So from that standpoint, that process was a lot easier because we knew one another, and he knew um, the work that I could produce and the entire team could. So for me it was a great opportunity to work with Kayvon Thibodeaux from my past history.
And is it difficult? I know they're already motivated to make the jump to the next level, in this case the NFL, but is it difficult to motivate players of that high caliber, or do you find it relatively easy because they're already motivated?
Well, yeah, they're definitely already motivated. One of the biggest tasks is to keep them or guide them to stay motivated, like through an 8-week process to stay motivated on the task. Right, so there's so many external factors that could play a role in this. Again, most of the guys know their status before they enter the pre-draft process. So managing those expectations is one of the biggest things, and also keep those guys like just even keel through the process. Because it is a long process. Guys get mentally fatigued. There's about 10, 11 to 12 workouts a week, right? So for 8 weeks straight. And the normal person, I don't think, could adapt to that. Right? So again, when I say it's the most time-consuming and stressful period of the year, that's exactly um, what I mean. Um, so
And,
what
and
is
I'm I'm sure it's difficult to keep them focused. Not only are they having 10 to 12 workouts a week, but keeping them focused on training, because there's a lot of external factors, as you mentioned. You have a lot of different maybe commercials or brands trying to connect with you at that point when you're that high caliber, such as Kayvon Thibodeaux. So that is interesting to hear. Could you just quickly, I know we're going to start to wrap up here in a minute, but could you start to tell us about your future plans, where you want to take things from here?
um, yeah. So like me, I just got back in school. Because I think in the near future, something that I do want to focus on is it working to become a strength coach, whether it's in the professional ranks, or the high school ranks, or the collegiate ranks. That is something that I want to shift it. This is my entire career. I've been in the private sector, like the private sector in a private facilities, private studios, working with professional and private athletes. Um, Over the next 2 or 3 years, 2 to 5 years, I really want to, you know, get back into that. Like when I interned at Exos, everything was scripted in a professional strength and conditioning space. And as I've gotten into working with professional athletes, youths, kids, um, I've gotten away from that because I've started focusing on development and performance. Um, yeah, but the next 2 to 3 years, or 2 to 5 years, I really want to focus on getting back into the strength and conditioning space with the collegiate of our program.
And now that you're starting to go back to school, your degrees in, is it exercise science?
So exercise science and with the minor in communication, again, go back to what we talked about when I began working with athletic games and felt like some of the things, communication was not my strong suit. So those are things that I had to work on. Get a public speaking coach, communications coach, learn how to um, actually pronounce my words fully. We have a little slang in the South, so I tend to use that quite often. But communication is something um, that has grown on me, and I definitely want to continue to master things that I'm not good at.
It's great to hear that you start to understand your strong suits and then in some cases your weaknesses, and going back to school and developing your training, but also something that you want to work on is communication. That's great to hear that you're starting to work on some things that you've been working on for a number of years now. And just to wrap up, so now that we're at the end of hearing your story, what advice would you give to yourself at the start of your journey that you didn't know that you know now, if anything?
I would tell my younger self to keep going. Like if I would have stopped and I think if I would have stopped and just focused on um, things that in the space that I was in at the time, like going to school and not worrying about training or pushing to be better than I was, I wouldn't be where I was today. So the advice that I would say was, don't listen to anyone and just keep going. Focus on your dreams and your goals and your ambitions. Because a lot of people told me I should get a job, I should go back to school, I should focus on this and that. And I think if I would have did that, I would have lost 3 years of, you know, pushing the excellence. And I think by not listening, doing my own thing, like I said before, this is something that have always been my personality. Just go, 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 go. Um, it helped me get to the point where I am today. I've talked to you on the phone a few days ago. Like my motto is it's just work, right? So for me, when I'm actually in work mode, like, and there are no distractions, nothing can mitigate me from what I want to accomplish or do in this time of space that I'm in.
And I'm sure that resonates with a lot of folks, where obviously friends and family or other outside influences, they try to steer you in the right direction, but not always knowing what's best for you as an individual. And that's something that a lot of folks need to find out and figure out for themselves. So thanks again for sharing your story.
Yes,
we do appreciate you having on the show. Once again, Darelle Noel of Athletic Gains. Wish you the best in this upcoming year of training. I'm sure you have some NBA training coming up this summer. We're going to have a busy summer in the NBA. But I do appreciate your time and coming on the show, Darelle.
I appreciate you so much. Thank you guys for having me, and I look forward to continuing working with you guys and speaking with you guys soon.